basically
We
we
said
are
something that was true.
we said something that was true and got cut off for a moment. So
There's
I
a
was
Mel
making the
Gibson
point.
movie just like this. What is it? Confidential something? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, let me put it. Let me put it that. Well, I mean, let's go back. It's worth the laugh. But um, back to seriousness and what I said about Pompeo and the Nixon speech. This is essentially the watershed moment where it is painfully clear to everyone that since then, American and Western administration has been keeping pushing Xi's buttons because we know he's only going to make the situation worse for himself, and that Xi as a person is someone. If he can make you lose $1, he is willing to lose 1 million. So,
We call
and
that petty.
well, he's not even. How do I say that? He is not even successful in his pettiness. So if you turn the equation around, if I pay $1 and there is a leadership change in China, he is too. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing where I don't know if I said it in the first part of the video, but if you vilify people, if you call them all sorts of name, call them racist, and say, uh, and then you are angry at them that they don't give you money, without thinking about, well, this is just the reaction to me saying that, and that goes back to what you said about NATO expansion and so on. There is a component certainly where this story can be distorted in that way, as Russia is being threatened, but Putin's calculation, that is something I didn't say before I started recording, but Putin's calculation is the Western world says we don't want war with Russia, means that they are not going to fight if I'm starting to roll the tanks. Problem is, we will. So, and that is becoming painfully clear to him. So, what is not painfully clear to him, apparently, and that is why he is still in bed with China and Xi, is that when you look at the Chinese expansion in the South China Sea, this is essentially a modernized version of the Japanese war plan for World War II. The next stage of that war plan was to take Siberia. And the Russians and the Chinese, they have been fighting over that part of Siberia for a few times. Yeah. So that is not a quiet border. So, and realistically, what do the Russians have there? Nothing. Yeah. So especially
They
now
have a
when you look at,
port.
well, this is literally,
There's
how
some
do I say that?
contested islands at the very north of the chain. I mean,
But that is all things that are not valuable to the Russians and very valuable to the Chinese.
I guess you could say snow, but I don't think Russia's short.
No, this is the same situation. This is the same situation. Why Japan was so successful at the beginning of world of their entering in World War II. Number one, any opposition from the U.S. in from Pearl Harbor or from the Philippines was eliminated at stage one.
Stage two, attack places that have gasoline. Or
Number
you could
two,
get
attack
gasoline.
places that have gasoline, natural resources, and the infrastructure that you want. Hong Kong was supplied until shortly before the Japanese showed up. The Japanese saw, well, Hong Kong is defended in that direction, Hong Kong and Singapore. We just come from the other direction where they can't shoot us.
Yeah.
So, and the the fall of Hong Kong within days was or gave Japan not
Impressive.
only the resources but the infrastructure to hold on to that area for much longer than what would have been realistically possible.
Look, if you want to take a small force and occupy a small piece of land that will control the greater part of a country, the key is go where the British built their fort. Gibraltar, Hong Kong, keeps going. You know what I'm saying? Wherever the British showed up and said, if we go there, we can oppress everything as far as the eye can see. They did a damn fine job of picking the real estate.
It's not only that. It's not only that. When you think forward now with the situation continuing, how is that going to play out? Now we are giving weapons that the Ukrainians don't really need. As you were saying, well, you use that to strike at radars to make sure the Russians bring out the good stuff.
No, I was saying
Um,
that's one strategy. I
that is
didn't
that
go
is
to
one strategy.
military college. I'm not a West Point graduate.
Neither did I.
No
And
Virginia Tech, nothing.
well,
I mean,
let's
shout out
let's.
to those people. They
I mean, this is do so if you use a strategy or if you use means that the enemy does not expect. You accomplish two things at the same time. You give them more to think about than they can handle, and you completely eliminate any immediate reaction they can have because it's based on something they didn't expect. So let's put it that way. By this time, um, I would say Putin understands that there is incalculable risks if he pushes the framework too far.
Mhm.
And one of that too far moments we have already told him is nuclear weapons. So anyone with the brains of Putin will make sure they don't get used. Doesn't mean he is not doing the calculation of, well, if I go down, so do you. But I mean, we are discussing weapons of mass destruction here, and the Russian view on weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons, is it's just another tool.
Mhm.
And it holds true in terms of their major war strategy for any offensive against NATO would have been to saturate the area not with nukes. That would have been one part of the strategy, but for the most part, their strategy was to saturate Germany with chemical weapons.
Mhm.
And I mean, this type of warfare hasn't worked in World War One in the favor of the nation that started it. Yeah,
No.
not really. It
Yeah.
it
Well,
led
it didn't work
to,
for World War II for most of the nations that led with an attack.
well, look at it from this point of view. Even Hitler was smart enough to control his chemical weapons and say no when the German army wanted to use it.
I mean, the
So,
admiral, the admiralty of the Japanese were smart enough to know we shouldn't attack America, but if we're gonna do it, by God, we better get it right.
Pearl Harbor is certainly worth an episode. What was happening there and why the strategy made sense and was in
No,
some ways poorly
but look at it.
executed.
So World War One, so Germany chemical weapons defeated by chemical weapons, arguably. Look at World War Two. Germany came in, defeated everyone with tanks. Arguably was defeated by tanks and air power. If you look at Japan, uh, led with an attack, naval, i.e., planes, naval aviation warfare. The beginning of that being the dominant naval warfare, they lost to. Well, technically, the the war was over before the atom bombs. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
but
the thing.
that plane didn't take off from. It took off from an island. It was an army bomber. But
Yeah.
naval aviation pushing island hopping with Marines taking the islands, they
Well,
lost. My point is, look at all
Operation
these examples
Olympic.
of people losing the war the same weapons that they used
Yep.
to start it.
So, and I mean, in terms of that, another episode could be looking at Operation Olympic, in the tentative invasion of Japan, instead of the atom bomb. But that aside, how is this? How are we go? Or how is the Ukrainian conflict going further? I think we are
When's
in a
mud season
situation
over? A month?
in April, May.
Okay, so a month or two, the mud will be open, and then all hell's gonna break loose. That's what I see coming.
But
I
what I see
I
coming
see
is
a dash for the finish line trying to end it this year.
the Russians are certainly going to keep throwing bodies at the problem, and the Ukrainians have now all the Russian equipment they will ever need. People that are trained on it, people that are trained on Western weapons. We have round about 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers that are rested and trained on the Western weapons they are getting now. So there is a case, as I just mentioned, chemical weapons. There is a case of using them in Ukraine. Question is, what is the next escalation stage from Ukraine and us?
No, I would not. If I was Russia, I would not use chemical weapons. I wouldn't use dirty bombs, nukes, anything like that, because you're just making you're stacking the deck for the other team. You're already behind the eight ball in the PR department. There's no sense to end up in the history books. Right now, this one's going to be a footnote. There's no reason to be a paragraph in the ages of history of what you did. So what the Russians need to do is they need to break through. They need to control as much of the country before winter sets in at the end of this year. Once the mud unlocks this year, they need to steamroll as much as they can. They need to take it. And while it locks up over winter, they need to pray. And this is my opinion, they need to pray for the harshest winter possible. And then they need to do everything they can. They need to figure out logistics to be the heroes of the day who keep bringing energy in, food and the gas into the area. And you figure there was already a referendum. Eastern Ukraine could go either way. They voted to be Ukraine, they voted to be Russia before. So if you can be the savior, you say, look, and then you stop there. You say, we came in here, and then you get all of the parts of the country that you would want. Anything that a resource, you get the coastline, you get the gas, you get the grain, and then you just hope that everything locks up. And you hope you don't attack anything, and then every time that's the way the news works. By 2024 something else will have happened, or she'll be invading Taiwan, and no one will give a shit anymore, and then you can keep the useful half of the country that you wanted in the first part, that speaks your language, that may or may not want to be part of you. I don't know, it makes no sense. Why would you resort to some war crimes? Like,
Well,
this seems so
my
simple.
rationale, as the scenario that you pictured, yeah,
Yeah,
is not going to happen for the Russians. And first of all, question if they really break through, which I doubt. Which I doubt. I don't see a major sustained breakthrough unless the Ukrainians want the Russians exactly where they are going. And once you cut that arm off, and you go on this about in the PR department, well, we eliminated one convoy, now we eliminated the second one. Keep coming.
hmm
Yeah. The other
just
thing,
for the record, I'm not pro-Russian. It's for the
no,
debate.
that's
Yeah,
understood. That's understood. We are looking at from the theoretical side
yeah.
of this, how this could go. Um, I my scenario is exactly as that. At the point of when the mud season is over, the Russians will lead a massive tank assault against the Ukrainian front. The Ukrainians will counterattack with their Western equipment and eliminate that attack.
They're gonna shoot shoulder-fired stuff out of holes in the ground, and then they're gonna shoot and scoot. Then they're gonna go back, find another one, find another hole, find another rocket, and just keep going back.
Another scenario is that the Ukrainians will go on the attack exactly 5 minutes before the Russians start rolling, which is well, at the beginning of Barbarossa, when the Russians started counterattacking, that was the German strategy, and ironically, that was exactly what the Russians did to any German attack after Case Blue. So after
Okay.
42, they used our tactics against us. And what I foresee is that the Ukrainians will continue to increase casualties for the Russians. It's no point taking more equipment because they have all the equipment they need. They have more equipment than people.
Right.
So
From
let's
the
split this
Ukrainian side,
further.
it's pretty easy too.
Let me finish this idea, and why I mentioned chemical weapons is once this is becomes a competition in body bags and Putin realizes he is losing badly. He doesn't want the Ukrainians to move towards those areas that are Russian or are occupied by Russia. So he will saturate the border with chemical weapons. The thing why I said chemical weapons is that the aftermath of a chemical attack is the problem.
It's an
You
invisible fence.
It is an invisible, exactly. It's an invisible fence that is much harder to clean up than a nuclear fence. That is those materials the Russians are using are particularly nasty. So you have for all the people that don't know how chemical weapons work is even let's just say these weapons are used in a certain area and Ukrainian area there is grass, there is forest. You just have to walk through a forest after it has rained multiple times that has been subject to these weapons, these fumes, to be poisoned. And again, the Russian stuff is particularly nasty because the Russian delivery systems are highly inaccurate. So same thing with their nuclear weapons. Why are their nukes bigger than ours? Because they need to calculate, well, I'm not hitting my target spot on. I need enough punch in that weapon that if I go 100, 200, 300 meters the wrong way,
Yeah,
I
splash
still
value.
take out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that would make sense in terms of we are not achieving our objectives. If the Russians don't achieve their objectives and they want to maintain control of the areas they have taken. So the question then is how will NATO and Ukraine react? Ukrainians will be up in arms and will be shouting bloody murder. Western world, there is a scenario where the Western world will say, well, at least it's not nukes. And that is, I think, the incentive for Putin to consider this. Under normal circumstances, if this war remains conventional, I can only see that the Ukrainians will, over the next months and years, go through the Russian defenses every time the mud season is over, every time the winter begins, when the mud freezes. They will commence certain operations, and even in areas that are Russian controlled, this will wear down. And I mean, there is nothing more devastating to an occupying army to be shot at in the rear areas. This is what prepared the invasion on D-Day. This is what broke the camel's back when Americans occupied Iraq. Yeah, these are things that this is a type of warfare you can't win. And look at it from this point of view. You just need one Ukrainian, not even somebody of conscription age. You need an old man in a wheelchair throwing a hand grenade into a couple of Russians. Yeah, the old man in the wheelchair is going to die, but so are 4 or 5 Russians, and even the same number will be wounded, psychologically affected. We call it PTSD. It doesn't exist in Russia, but those are the effects, and you will
You
the
left out an
Ukrainian
effect.
the wounded
Not,
effect.
I don't know if you thought it all the way through, but you get another effect from your exact scenario. So you have the old man who's in the wheelchair, who's willing to die for country. You give him some grenades, okay, so you take out some Russians, you do some psych value, but also that old man was somebody's grandpa. It was somebody's dad, somebody's brother, all of these
Yeah,
things. And he was somebody who no one ever wanted to leave behind. So every time they had to run from the Russians, the old man in the wheelchair slowed down the progress of the retreat of the Russian civilians. So
exactly,
now,
exactly.
not only is it a negative for the Russians, but it's also a net positive for the Ukrainians. Even if he only
Let me put
succeeds
it.
in killing himself, you
Let me
still get
put
the
it in terms.
psychological
Yeah,
effect, and then you
exactly.
still have the benefit for the Ukrainians. Which I know
What
that's like a dark ass way to look at it, but
it is,
it's
look,
war.
it is morally reprehensive to think that way. Yes, but
Well,
it is
so is war.
actual.
That's the point of war. The
So
point
is
of war is
war.
to make it so bad that no one ever
Exactly.
wants it.
The thing is the calculation. And again, the Russians do know that again, Putin is not stupid. He knows for every grandpa in a wheelchair he kills, he is creating 5 new Ukrainian soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing more frightening than a civilian determined and equipped to defend their home. There is no army in this world that can win such war without completely depopulating the area.
That's why America would have to be glassed from space if you wanted to take America. We're already armed.
So
Every time you walk by a window, you're getting shot.
that no, that
Go take a
it's
piss, getting shot at. Got to take a shit, shoot.
and I mean you have seen the original movie Red Dawn, right?
I've seen all of them, yeah.
Yeah. And when you
Which
look
they're
at
completely unrealistic. No one's paradropping troops into the United States mainland.
hey,
No,
it
it's
was
not
an
gonna.
interesting
No.
it was an interesting movie. Both the premise as the actual thing. But going forward, look at it from this point of view. In the
Dude, those
80s,
high school kids had more guns at the high school than the soldiers falling down.
well, that is one thing I could now say. Well, why would you attack an American? Because they are going to shoot back. But a different day, different story.
I know, right?
It's look, both kids and teachers are. I'm sure there is areas where both kids and teachers are going to school armed. So it is in that an unrealistic scenario, absolutely. But going back to Putin's miscalculation about Europe, and we are now, I think, people at my age, in their 40s, or in your age, in your 30s, we are realizing, well, this is the 1980s all over again. If push comes to shove, somebody will hand us an old assault rifle and tell us where the Russians are. Yeah,
We
and
bring our own
I mean, you guys are
from
going to bring
home.
your own from home, but I had absolutely no illusion about that scenario when I was growing up, that if things go really bad during the Cold War, that people as young as 16 would be drafted into the army, equipped, and sent to the front.
Mhm.
So, and it is that kind of mindset, having grown up in this scenario, what Putin had no idea about, that she has no idea about, and it is just that kind of mindset where we say, "Oh shit, not again."
Hmm.
But I think psychologically, Western countries as a whole have been much better prepared, or are much better prepared for a conflict with Russia and or China than what their societies are prepared for
Okay,
such a conflict.
China's military is unproven. Getting into like fist fights and melee combat with the Indians on top of a mountain dick measuring doesn't tell me your combat effectiveness in the field. When's the last time you took an island? When's the last time you assaulted an airfield? When's the
I,
last time you you assaulted a beach like that was contested? When's the last
um,
time you were in a fucking
I
war?
can run you through that. I can
When's
run
the
you
last
through
time they
that.
were in a fucking war?
The last time
You got a
the
bunch of people,
Chinese,
you got a bunch of stuff that you're on
no, no,
paper.
no.
You're on paper.
I
You're
can
on
run you
paper.
through. I can run you through. Uh, Going back from today to the past, the last real war the Chinese were fighting was against Vietnam, and elite PLA formations were annihilated by local old school Viet Cong. That
Probably
is
with the
what
same
happened.
rifle they took home from the last one.
Very, very likely. When you go in terms of fist fighting and pissing contest, that the rumor mill is that the Chinese had 3 times more soldiers on that mountain than the
Mhm.
Indians, and the Indians were wiping the floor with the Chinese.
Well, the Indians also send in those shock troops. I forget the name of them now, but big Indians, and they train them in just hand to hand combat. These dudes are psychos. They just like they literally go through and they're known for breaking people's necks. They just go through and
This
kill people with their bare hands. They sent those
one
guys up
thing
there,
one thing
and the
about the
Chinese
Indian
kind of backed
army.
off.
One thing about the Indian army and why the British held on to India for so long is the Indians don't fuck about in war as well. So if you really want reliable soldiers
No, but
with a
that's you
good
got to get
combat
the
record,
six.
you take the Indians.
No, but you got it. It's not all Indian. It's specific. You got to get the six. The six are the warriors, man. I heard about them. They're fucking old school badasses. They have the little. Now they have the bracelet, but they used to have the shield that covered their whole offhand to so they could block swords with their arm. It's SIKH.
GH.
Shit.
Oh, no,
Shit.
KH. Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right. Seek.
Kick.
So,
Yeah, yeah, those dudes are hardcore.
in terms of combat ability, it is not that the Chinese army is unproven. The Chinese army is incompetent, plain and simple. And the reason for a young man in China wanting to join the army is I get my clothes, I get food 3 times a day. That's the reason why so many young men want to join the army. And so far, the Chinese army has, I think, for 5 years consecutively lowered their standards in terms of what kind of physical ability we require for you to become a soldier.
Good question.
Yeah.
So since you lived in China, you're familiar with the 73 Eastings tank battle?
73 where?
Eastings? I might be misquoting. So it's this tank battle where it's showed the difference between the Americans and the Iraqis in the first Gulf War. The first Gulf War, the Iraqis did exactly what they were supposed to, and they would wait for orders. Commanders in the field, they were told to go to the 73 Easting, if I'm getting this right. If I'm getting anything wrong, it's just numbers. And they realized that they could take more without overextending their flanks. So the commanders in the field did not wait for the generals in Washington or even the generals in Kuwait. They went ahead and took it and assaulted the force. So I'm curious to see, since you with the amount of authoritarianism and everything, I could see in a real war, full on engagement, I could see a scenario where the front has actually reached its objectives, but it doesn't know what to do. And instead of taking the initiative, I could see the rear of the Chinese army slamming into the front of the Chinese army and basically not killing people, just bogging down and being all right there. And then I don't know,
I see where you're
start
coming from.
bombing.
I see where you're coming from, and um, I don't see that. I don't see that scenario coming. What the scenario I see is that orders are filtered down from the top to the bottom, like in every other army. And the order is will at the front line. The order will essentially be, "Hey, you squad, assault this position." Squad will assault the position, get annihilated because it's a defilated machine gun. Yeah.
Yep.
So the commander of the local commander, okay, 73 Easting.
Just
Can't
as a
really say
reference
much
point.
about that. What is happening is local commanders, both the Russians as well as the Chinese, don't have any authority other than repeating the orders they have received from their superiors. There is no such thing in Chinese society as taking the initiative, because whenever you take initiative, even if let's not use a war scenario, let's use a corporate scenario. You are an ordinary worker in a Chinese factory, and you see, well, if we do this, if we change the process in that way, we will save money. So what will happen is you will not be thanked by anyone. You will be fired by your direct line manager for A, going behind their back, B,
Mhm.
for being right, and no, B for making him look bad, and C for being right.
Mhm.
And then that person that fires the one with the idea will get the credit
He gets the
for it.
idea.
So and Chinese people learn very, very quickly that it is not worth it to raise your head and open your mouth. So what will happen is those orders in the military scenario will filter down and take that position.
Well, they're
Position
taught
is
to remember, not taught to learn. And as far as I've been hearing, that's from
that's the
their
thing.
first introduction to schooling of any sort.
In
They're
any
taught
kind of
to
they are
remember, not to learn.
socialized. Exactly. They are socialized to not question and to just simply exactly do what you're told. And
I mean, remember all these
only
things,
when
but
you are
don't
told,
think for yourself. Yes?
exactly. Do
Okay.
what you're told, do exactly what you're told, do only when you are told. So what would happen is if there is no order because the command structure is eliminated, the army will stand there and wait and poke their nose. So let's in the scenario where I say a squad gets the order, assault and take that position. Squad assaults that position, gets annihilated. The local Chinese commander will go to the next squad and say, take that position. They will do exactly the same thing as the first squad and get annihilated. So, and you can line up all
Third,
squads of the
fourth.
Chinese army behind that and watch that. It will not click as in, well, we have to do something else. We have to go around that position, attack it from the back or whatever. It won't. As I used to when I encountered this scenario, is you can take, I said, you can take 100 Chinese. You as a foreigner tell them, if you put your hand on the electric cable with so and so many volts, you will die. One Chinese, because I don't listen to foreigners, will do that and drop dead. The rest of of them watching it will not click and say, "Oh, because he touched that cable, he's dead." Yeah, it is true what this person said, especially if that person is not Chinese. So you have this scenario where you have an army that is, or a society that where initiative and thinking is punished, and even more so under communist party rule, because the people that think at some point they might think the communist party shouldn't be ruling China, and that is something. Even if you know this idea is going to come in 50 years, in 100, in after 100 ideas, you eliminate that now. So, and by doing that, you induce and teach people don't think, and that is the major problem of across Chinese society, not only in the army or in corporate scenarios. You have people, you have obviously very intelligent people in China. So you have people like you, me, yeah. How
Hmm.
do you say that? Little dang that thinks otherwise. And it is in Chinese context, it is those what Chinese society would call misfits, yeah, that are highly successful once they manage to be in that position where they can be. Or why are so many successful Chinese abroad? I mean, the really successful ones. Why do they keep a low profile? And why are they, once you know more, so staunchly anti-communist? There is a reason.
I don't want to go
So
back.
no, absolutely not. So this is also the irony. The people that are staunchly staunch Wumaos, yeah, abroad, this they don't click. Well, I'm here in a free country. Yeah, I have more freedom here as a foreigner than what I have in China
As a citizen.
and as a citizen. Yes. So in other words, the irony of doing something pro-Chinese that will get you into trouble in the foreign country and deported back to China doesn't click. I should be shutting up about this. I should be grateful I am not being persecuted, because when you are being sent back for that, you are in trouble in China as well. So that is
Yeah.
that is the irony of it. So you see, there was this basically there was this situation where the U.S. intelligence service caught a couple of spies, and some of them fled to the embassies. Some of them made it out of the U.S. in time before they got arrested. All these people, once they arrive in China, will be punished, not for doing something wrong, but for getting caught. So the logic is you fucked this up for us. So if you didn't fuck up, no one would know that we are doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
So the person that gets
Not
caught,
it's our fault that we're doing bad things. It's your fault
no,
for getting caught doing them.
exactly,
You suck.
exactly. It's that is the kind of logic, and part of that logic is the party is always right. Yeah, that kind of thinking. So it can't be that this was a bad idea. It has to
It
be
was our
you.
idea.
Yeah, it has to be you who didn't do it properly and got caught. So the other thing, what is speaking against any success in Chinese military operations against a Western trained force, is they the political indoctrination of not only the armed forces but Chinese society as such rates Western intelligence basically that of a tapeworm. Yeah. In other words, the Western people are so stupid they will do what we say. And surprise, they're not. So there is really I my main feeling about this. I wouldn't have Chinese friends or Chinese relatives, my Chinese wife. So I wouldn't have all that and be not sympathetic to the ordinary Chinese that are partly completely different from what the government is propagating for them, partly caught in a situation where they know only obedience ensures survival, or as a third term, so misled that they don't even have enough information to make any kind of decision, or have not been trained to make a decision based on, even if they have information. So it is a scenario where I say it is very difficult to turn that into something positive, even if there is the inertia and the desire to do so. Yeah. So, I mean, we still have people in Eastern Germany that say, "Oh, Eastern Germany was great." Yeah.
Mm.
No, Eastern Germany was bankrolled by Western Germany for the latter part of its existence, and simply had no choice but to fold when they did. So this distorted view of reality is a problem, or would be a problem. And when you go to another scenario, North Korea, South Korea, the South Koreans have stopped talking about reunification. Yeah, they know it's not going to work out. So even if you had a regime change in China right now, it would be incredibly difficult to turn the current situation into a success story. Same thing with Russia. Although with the Russians, I do see a lot more inertia in society to actually change things for the
Yeah.
better for themselves. The problem in Russia is they have no idea how. So if Putin was gone by tomorrow, in an hour or so, there is nothing that comes next. Yeah. The problem in China is there would be plenty of people coming next, and
But
the
more of the same?
more of the same has been a scenario that initially that would be an idea, but even if where there are reformers such as Gorbachev was in the Soviet Union, yeah, but even if someone like that came to power in China and were sustainably in position, moved the country on a trajectory of, yes, you are allowed to vote in the next so at some point in the next 5 years, how much goodwill would there be outside of China to support that? How much you mentioned last week about basically Vietnam, India, other countries around China, basically waiting for a situation where they can stab the corpse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a scenario where even an honest reformer would fail because there is no support outside of China. And I think for the Western world, the difficulty would be to
Well, there's also
distinguish
very little international goodwill left over from the previous leader.
zero. When you have, look, Sweden
Negative.
is probably one of the most liberal and open minded societies in the world. And if Swedish society, 93% of Swedish society is anti China, then you
You
have
did
fucked up.
something.
You did something wrong.
Yeah, you did
And
something.
really, for me it is very difficult because in general, whether it's Chinese, Americans, Russians, Africans, whatever, I don't want people to live in the 21st century. Think about that. I don't want people to live in a scenario where they can't speak up, can't feed themselves, can't clothe themselves, and have to worry whether they are alive tomorrow if they go to sleep now. So that is an unacceptable scenario in a world that has never been more affluent than what we are now. So from a perspective from a Chinese perspective, what I would say is that only China can rescue China. And unfortunately, I don't see any scenario where this does not come with the situation in China becoming worse. Same with Russia, by the way. I don't see a scenario where we can switch right now or in a foreseeable future from A to B. So things have to go much, much worse until people have the motivation. I mean, in China, you have localized demonstrations against the government on a daily basis now. And the fact that you and I don't see it on mainstream Western news is is interesting because it shows me that the Western world says, well, let the Chinese deal with that. And what I can see in a scenario of conflict is that the moment this starts, the firewall goes down, and we start bombarding people with Western propaganda,
Which we
uh,
will.
which we will. The
We
next
will.
scenario, in terms of
That's what it is.
peaceful escalation, is that my recommendation to speed these things up is don't ban TikTok, ban WeChat. If you ban WeChat, which is the app that Chinese abroad use to talk to Chinese in China, yeah, their relatives, their friends, their families, you have a problem because the only way they can then access that line of communication is if either China allows Western social media, which is not going to happen, or Chinese abroad start getting VPNs, bring them back to China, and use them, then spread them around in their circles. So everybody in China can start going outside of the firewall. So it is a no-win scenario for the Communist Party. So I mean, a couple of years ago, I said, and I know we have the ability, we could take down the firewall right now, gone, yeah, which would happen in a conflict scenario. But it is way more effective to let all the Chinese do the work. Yeah, you have you have hundreds of thousands of Chinese students worldwide that are cut off from communication like this. What will they do? They will spend $5 for a VPN. They will use that VPN when they are back in China to access Western media.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that kind of thing spreading, at some point, even Chinese government will realize we don't have enough bullets for all these people. So, and that is the scenario the Eastern German government realized when they deposed of Honecker. So the political situation was completely unsalvageable. And in terms of putting a solution forward, it was either shoot the protesters, but we don't have enough bullets, or fold.
Mm-hmm.
And I foresee the situation that if the Communist Party keeps on the current trajectory, they are only accelerating that. The other problem for the Chinese Communist Party is there is no other way. Any decision they make is a worse decision than escalation. So it is a problem if you are the factory of the world and the world is no longer ordering stuff from you. So, and again,
Then
this is
you're a
something.
warehouse.
Yeah, but
A
not one with
factory that
traffic.
no one orders from is a warehouse.
So you have I just
Really expensive one.
a really expensive one, and the situation right now in the ports is they can't unload ships because the ports are full of empty containers. There is not enough going out to allow something to go in. This I lived a bit land inward from Shanghai. I lived in Suzhou, and in Suzhou as well as the port in Taicang, which is northeast of Suzhou, they have containers stocked there that should be in the port of Shanghai because the port of Shanghai is full.
Mm-hmm.
So You have the same situation in the other two large ports, Tianjin in the north and Guangzhou, Guangdong area in the south. So, and shouting about, oh, it's not true, then later admitting through your statistical bulletin, well, it is true, yeah, and then asking the same people that you vilified half a year ago to give you money to resolve the situation, which you can't, even if you had the money. It's yeah,
Yep.
it's I don't see that these actions that basically pre-positioning soldiers in Taiwan. Yeah, there's definitely not only education going on in Taiwan right now for the soldiers. So there is combat troops there
Yeah.
that are there to dissuade any form of military action. There is definitely clandestine operations going on
Oh yeah.
within Russia and Ukraine by Western forces. And the, like I said, the situation has to deteriorate further for the locals, for the Russians, for the Chinese, but also for us in order to improve. Or as there's something we wanted to talk about, but I think we're going to do that in another video. Is the current financial situation in the US, Europe, and so forth. I think we're going to make a break here and come back with that. What do you think?
I'm headed to the bank to withdraw my cash and put it into something more safer as we talk. So
Right,
he's Roland, and I'm Rish,
that's Rish.
and our banks might be screwed, but we'll be here soon to tell you about it.